Well, is James saying that you're saved by works without faith? Does he ever suggest that? Or is James saying you can only be saved by a genuine faith? And how do you know if it's genuine? Well, by the way you live. Doesn't Paul say exactly the same thing? I don't see any distinction between the two. For example, look at James 1:27, the definition of true religion. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained or unspotted from the world, which means that pure religion is pure works. Would Paul agree with James 1:27? Would the prophets of the Old Testament agree? Well, do you remember Micah and Amos and Isaiah and all those places we looked at on the way through? What kind of religion does God desire? Remember, they offered sacrifice and they offered Sabbath keeping and they crowded into the temple and they sang lustily their songs, and God says, what I want is integrity and humility. And how did Jesus divide the sheep from the goats? Does it even mention their faith, by the way? Not once. Would that leave out faith? Did Jesus say much about belief and trust and faith? A tremendous amount about it. And yet, he said just as much about the way a person behaves. Now, look at Romans 1:5, and you'll remember how Paul opens this document that is supposed to exalt faith above all things else. And Paul says, I've been commissioned to make known God's good news, now verse 5, in order to bring about faith. What do you have in verse 5 of Romans 1? To bring about what? Obedience. But what kind of obedience? The obedience of faith. That's just the point. And I think James would say, well said, precisely. My conviction is that Paul could read James and say, well said, and vice versa. I see no conflict whatever between the two. So what do you suppose led to this feeling? Is it possible that there had been so much legalism in Luther's day that he just went too far in the other direction for a while? Ellen White has an interesting comment. We've heard a great deal about faith. It's time now we heard a little more about works. A matter of balance. Isn't it true that faith without works is a dead faith? Is anyone saved by a dead faith? So you don't really trust. I don't see any disagreement between the two at all. Does anyone? Yes.
Galatians 5:6, which Paul writes is supposed to be the epitome of.
Well, let's look at that. Galatians 5:6. For in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is of any avail, but faith working through love. There it is again. It's a faith that works. But note the way that it does. That's an excellent verse to put in there. Now, if a man tries to be saved by works without any faith, can God save those who do not trust him, no matter how hard they work? No, there must be trust, but the man who says, I trust you, but I don't have time to listen, and I don't intend to follow your instructions, because if I were to follow your instructions, that would be works. That makes nonsense out of faith. I trust you, but I'm not going to do what you say. Try that on your doctor. You say, I'm very sick, and I trust you. And the doctor says, do the following. Oh, no, it would only be faith if I can go to bed tonight and wake up well in the morning. Well, it doesn't come that easily, does it? It's a faith that works. Faith is a willingness to listen and to carry through with the instructions as best one can. It's true, our efforts may not be at all perfect, quite fumbling, but the trust must be complete.